During the making of our film opening, we learnt about new technologies and over time developed our skills on them. The main new technologies we used were Final Cut Pro, GarageBand and LiveType. We used LiveType to create our idents. At first, Poppy and I had never used the software before. We learnt by experimenting with different techniques on it, such as different live fonts where the font has an effect or becomes animated, and changing the position of words. We created our 3 idents using a mixture of our own footage and LiveType. We used GarageBand for creating our soundtrack, which again, Poppy and I had never used before, and therefore did not know how to use it. However, we started by learning the basics and then experimented with different instruments and sounds. We also researched into which instruments fitted in with the slasher genre most. We found that, typically, strings or synth effects are used, as these help to create suspense. We kept experimenting until we found what we wanted for our film opening. I think our soundtracks really make the movie, and without them it wouldn't be as effective, as also shown on our feedback. Many people have been commenting on the soundtrack being very effective. Final Cut Pro is what we edited our film opening on, which Poppy and I hadn't used before, so we had to start learning from scratch. At first we learnt the basic editing skills such as how to use the blade tool. We then started looking at different effects to make the CCTV footage as realistic as possible. This is an example of the editing skills we used for our film. Firstly, we added the effects such as bad TV and black and white. This made it black and white and had the quality of the screen slightly distorted and fuzzy. We then experimented around until we got the timer section, with which we made a certain date and time countdown appear on screen to make it seem more realistic. We also edited it by cutting certain parts from scenes, such as the stabbing, which we felt seemed fake at first, as did audience feedback. We changed certain shots on Final Cut to make them more effective, like creating close and Dutch angles. However, some of our experiments didn't make it into our Final Cut, such as experimenting with crossfading. The most useful tools to us were the different effects and colour changing tools on Final Cut Pro, as these really helped create a sinister and slasher feel to our movie. Overall, the technology we used helped us create very close to what we imagined and planned for. I think if we had used analogue film, it would not have had the same look or feel to the movie, especially with all the effects we used and editing. It would also have been a lot more time consuming. This shows how digitisation is making it a lot more accessible to everyone for cheaper. If anything, a better quality camera could have helped us in our low-level lighting scenes, of which there were a lot of, but overall the equipment and technology used was very good and helped us create what we had envisioned. This has shown us that we could create a movie similar to Lidonk and Scorsese and Colin, which were both made by indie film companies on micro budgets, using similar technology to what we used. Overall, we have learnt how to utilise all these new technologies to our advantage, using GarageBand to create a soundtrack and being able to experiment with different sounds. We have learnt how to decide if it sounded good or not so good. We've also learnt how to make a basic linear cut on Final Cut Pro, and also how to add effects, editing, and transitions to develop the movie even further into what we wanted it to be.